comfortable for yourself. See that you sit at a nice place. Somebody can sit in my paper chair there.
Your paper chair?
Reserve that all is for David.
The kursi.
But our David is not here today. Okay. Today we wanted to start to discuss our examen. And we have 2 weeks for the examen. Here is our friend Snowden. He doesn't want to come home because he thinks they will shoot him. They will put a bullet in his head or poison him.
Smart guy.
It's a track record we have.
It's not off the mark.
Okay,
Where is he right now? Did he go to...
He's in Moscow still.
Oh, still in Moscow.
Yeah. Okay, everybody gets the test here. We have 2 weeks, and so we will just go through it and work along this and prepare it so that everybody knows what to do. David, no, David's not here. Dustin, do you want one?
Sure.
Okay. Here I have another one. Okay, we just follow this, and then we want to do different things. I got something here from a radio station that is Fromm's speech, The Psychological Roots of War and Destruction. 3 audio, not videos, audios. So if we want to someday, we can listen to him. We will have his own voice in there. I have something here which we can think about. You know that the critical theory, of course, was connected or was opposed to fascism. It was somehow, went along with liberalism. It has sympathies for socialism. So these 3 things we have to be aware of if we want to understand Fromm and also Habermas and Hannes. So, but what we should see is, what the whole struggle with fascism was, because fascism threw them out of Frankfurt, and they could only come back after fascism had been defeated, and so on. So now I have a few things here which we can look at. Now, just let them go around. There are the fascists which we are concerned with here. There is Hitler, of course, and then there is Mussolini, and then there is Franco, and then there is Salazar, and then there's also Pavelic in Yugoslavia, in Croatia. So it was just for Croatia, which was a fascist state. So we cannot understand the critical theory as a whole, and Fromm and even Habermas and so on, if we don't know the opposition. So sometimes the best thing to know something is to know it from its contradiction, from its opposition. Then we will get the full gist of it. So I just show you this. You can just let it go around there. There are all kinds of Hitler books coming out. So you could say that Hitler was the real opponent. They opposed him from the very beginning. Also, the friends through whom I got connected with the Frankfurt School, that was Walter Dirks and Eugen Kogon, who wrote the SS State. They, of course, opposed Hitler from the 20s on, so it was a continual struggle. And so here is a new book there about the first is moving up in the world, Ulrich, and then there's a second volume about, and there are a lot of pictures in there too. Now today I got this here, which I didn't have. There is Jan Kirchhoff. He wrote these 2 volumes about Hitler, and this one I didn't have. That is one of the best pictures there which I ever saw of Hitler there. It shows him somehow, how he is posing without doubt, but and he was something like an actor, so but it comes very close to what he looked like in the late 40s of his life. So, and that is also here from Kirchhoff. So that is 1936, 1945, Nemesis. So when fate took revenge on him. So that is the continuation here. We can show this too. And then we can see how we want to do that. In order to make that point, I have we cannot have them all, of course. We can have maybe 10 minutes of each of them, or 15 minutes, or whatever you want to, and we can do it today and also next time. There is blind spot here, Hitler's secretary. She just died. I don't even know if she died. She's still alive. A girl from Munich who was 20 years old when she became his secretary, and she talked later on. So she did all the typing, and you can look at this too, and we can show. It's very short itself, but we can just have a few minutes. So then there is this thing about the downfall. That means that is the last moments in Nuremberg there. When she was there, by the way, Hitler sent her home there, and very late. And then there is the conspiracy. We can see a few scenes there. That was in Wannsee, where the final solution was decided. So that is Eichmann and Heydrich there in front. So these are the people who would have annihilated the whole Frankfurt School if they had stayed. They called it the coffee marks in Frankfurt, and so they were aimed at, and so they had to leave. Then they went to Switzerland, to France, to England, and then they came to Columbia University. Otherwise, they would have been on the list of annihilation. And then there is, of course, then the judgment at Nuremberg, which is a very good one. Afterwards, so they caught some of them, the main leaders, sentenced them to death and hanged them there. By the way, in a very inhuman way. You can be hanged in two ways. One is that your neck is broken, and that is very fast. But you can also be strangled, slowly. So, and that is, of course, a torturous thing. You're tortured to death until they strangle them against international law. And then we still have our dangerous method, which we want to go a little bit further into it, particularly to a point where we do not only see the fellow Jung and his patient, but where we see the confrontation between Jung and Freud. The patient whom we have seen already was a young Jewish woman, and she vacillated between Jung and Freud, and she finally became the lover of Jung for some time, but then she went over to Freud, and one element of the estrangement between the two was that case, this woman there, because Freud had a very strong ethic, so did Fromm, to treat people in psychoanalysis, and to fall in love or to have sex or whatever, that was against the rules. So that is the whole phenomenon of transference. So in the dialysis, the analysis, the patient may, transfer feelings for a father or feelings for a husband or whatever to the psychoanalyst, and in this situation, then it can easily happen that it becomes a more intimate type of a relationship, and that happened with that young woman. And then she went over to Freud, and she told him the whole story, and that it was not the only reason, but it was intensified the alienation between Jung and Freud. So, and we have that, and we can look at this. And then I have a few things here about, first of all, there is a problem of anxiety. So I think you have it on your list there, which is by Freud himself. So we want to stay in contact with him because we know that Fromm and Habermas and also Hannes combine Marx and Freud. They combine psychology and sociology. So this is the background. Now, behind that, there is, of course, then also the connection with the classical idealism and with historical materialism, with Marx and with Hegel and Kant and Fichte and so on. So, and let this go around. There is a book which has a title which is very close to ours. Erich Fromm, The Pathology of Normalcy. So what we call the pathology of reason and freedom, he called long before Habermas and Hannes the pathology of normalcy. That means the normal life is not normal. And then we have here Erich Fromm and critical criminology. You know that our department has a criminology department, sociology. It's very strong for many years already. So that would be interesting what contribution Erich Fromm can make to criminology. So I let this go around too. And then you know that Fromm Freud wrote a book on dreams in 1900, which was a tremendous breakthrough. In the religions, dreams always play an important role. The gods speak to people in their dreams. God speaks to Joseph to take Mary into Egypt. The child will not be killed, and so on. So, and then in modernity and the Enlightenment, that was dreams were thought to be just nonsense and little scraps from our everyday life, or when we have not eaten well and then our stomach gets upset, and so we have strange dreams or whatever. But Fromm does he rediscovers or tries to rediscover again the forgotten language. So the forgotten language of the dreams, and what he discussed, like Jung too, and Fromm, that the dreams are myth, really. They are, when we sleep, we cut off our relationship to the outside world, and then something else inside of us, the id, takes over and then represents myth, and one can compare these dream myth with fairy tales and religious myth and so on. So we saw that in that movie there where the Egyptian myth came up with the birds and the beasts and so on. Okay, so that is a very important thing. And then the crisis of psychoanalysis. So we know that Marxism, in a certain sense, is a crisis. We know that psychoanalysis is in a crisis. So they all, in the Frankfurt School, they are all revisionists. From the Soviet point of view, to be a revisionist was really a traitor. So everybody in the West, Western Marxism was considered to be revisionist. And then there was the real practice type of a socialism in the Soviet Union, and that was always confronted to each other. So they were confronted. So this in here you have essays on Freud, Marx, and social psychology, and then it's Fromm himself. So this is another one. So I just want to show you this. They are on your reading list, and you can choose then whatever you want to. Okay, so now we can start with our test there. Sociology 6.5 from social psychology today. Then it's pathology of reason and freedom. That's our theme, and particularly it's therapy. Please answer critically 8 out of the following 50 questions in essay form, or that is the second possibility you have. Concentrate on question 29 and question 30 and write an 8-page essay on your required first background reading and your required first self-chosen depth study. For instance, from one of these books. Keep the questionnaire and add it to your notes. So that means you can either answer 8 out of these questions which we have here, and then you come to question 29, and you can look at this. 29, where did the critical theorist, particularly from Harvard, get their concept of diagnosis? 29 is the other one. Give a critical summary of your first required background reading. That means Siebert from the critical theory to the critical political theology, personal autonomy, and universal solidarity. So you could just answer 8 questions. One of these questions would be this book, the 2 books there. That is necessary for those 2. So that is one version what you can do. That would be then 8 questions. What is it? 7? 8 questions. Yeah, 8 questions. That would be 8 pages then, let's say. And you have this other possibility, namely you can concentrate on these 2 books, the background reading and the depth study, and write 4 pages on each of those books. So this is the alternative. Whatever you want to do. Okay, question 29 and question 30. One is the background reading, the other one's the depth study. Background reading is for the methodology, dialectics, determinate negation. And then 30 is the content. So either a book by Habermas, book by Fromm, or a book by Harneth. You can take somebody else too, but you make it simpler for you. You make your life simpler if you take one of those 3 guys whom we are discussing here. But you can take another critical theorist as well. Okay. Okay, so let's just look at some of those questions there. What is the critical theory of society? So we did this here. We had the trailer and we had my lecture to some extent, give a summary of its history. So the history, we can sum it up very easily. It was founded in the 20s and 30s. It was connected with a similar institute in Moscow. So we have to see there were connections. Both institutes in Frankfurt and Moscow, both sociological institutes, were paid by Kurt Weill. Kurt Weill, you have to have, if you are critical of the society has to feed you, because you cannot criticize without eating some hamburgers. So this is very important. So now Kurt Weill was a merchant who brought food in from Latin America to Germany during the war. So, and he made a lot of money of it, but he was also very honored for doing this job. The Germans had an embargo. He broke through the embargo and brought all kinds of foods into Germany massively. So therefore he made a lot of money. But businessmen want to have a meaning in their life at a certain point, because just selling and some of that is not really the most meaningful things they think, they feel. I think, of course, it has great meaning. So, but nevertheless, he wanted to get a doctorate, an honorary doctorate. So he told the Frankfurt University that he would build that institute, which you saw in the movie there, if he would get a doctorate. So he gave a few million, and that was built, and later on it was bombed out by the British Air Force at night, and then the Americans bombed it out once more in daytime. So it was all in ruins when I came back again from the war. So then Kurt Weill also paid that institute in Moscow. So there in Moscow we had now a revolution. So that is why we see the critical theory has something to do with praxis. It does have something to do with revolutions. So what has happened? There was, in the 18th century, there was this bourgeois revolution. That means after centuries and centuries, the people who were in the cities, let's see, from the year 1000 on, Europe had cities again. And the cities were built wherever the Romans had cities. But the Roman cities had all been destroyed. The viaducts which brought the water in and so on broke down. The Germanic tribesmen could drink beer and all kinds of things, but they could not build those viaducts anymore. They could not repair the Roman streets anymore between Paris and Moguntia, Mainz, where I studied. So everything was in disarray. This is called the Dark Ages. You have heard this, Middle Ages are Dark Ages. So it's not really true that the Middle Ages are the Dark Ages. But from 500 to 1000, it was very dark. Dark in the church, unbelievable circumstance, even in the church. So the church could not resist fully the barbarism which really happened. So, and for the kings were concerned, and the feudal system, all that formed slowly, but it was a madhouse. But then slowly people, had the skills again to rebuild. They took the stones from the Romans and rebuilt the whole thing in their own style. And then these were the cities where the cathedrals were built. You go to Strasbourg, a great cathedral, Mainz and Worms, and so the cities became very rich and so on. And but then they were threatened, by the feudal lords and by other cities, so they got walls. So they were all walled cities, like we go to Dubrovnik. There you still have it. So the so-called bourgeoisie, or the burghers, they were sitting in these walled cities. And they were very well organized. They had guilds. So the carpenters had a guild, and the toolmakers or bakers, they all had guilds. It was also very religious. So they all had, in the West, one religion. That was Roman Catholicism. They had another religion in Eastern Europe. That was the Orthodoxy. So when you look at your road map on the B, you see Christianity at the Jewish-Christian period. Then comes the Greek Orthodoxy, that is, and the Muslim popular in the states, and so on. They were very much in contact with the Orthodoxy. So and in Ukraine, we have Orthodox priests and bishops and so on, and they were together. These two churches, the Orthodox Catholicism and the Roman Catholic Catholicism, were one thing really. And then by 800 they got in trouble about icons. There is this thing, this prohibition which the Frankfurt School has of images and names, and which goes back to Moses, second and third commandment, which also Islam has and Christianity and Judaism has. And then the modern Enlightenment Kant, who said the same thing: no images and no names of the absolute, total demythologization and so on. So now by 800 there was no demythologization, but the West thought that the icons were too much, because the artists made the icons of Jesus and Mary by praying. So they were not only works of art, they were religious worship. And the little farm women and so on did not only, want to go through that saint there to God or whatever, but they worshipped somehow these saints themselves, and the pictures of the saints and so on. So we know how careful it is. We have a congregation of Moses, but there's no statue of Moses. We have the Islamic center here, but there is no statue of Muhammad or whatever. So that has something to do with a very radical application of this. Now, both of these Catholic churches had lots of images, but one had more than the other. And the icons then became a point of struggle. And there was a council in Frankfurt which already sentenced that. But it took another 200 years until the two churches were separated. So that is called a schism. And I had a wonderful translator, Alexandra, when I was in November. So I said to Alexandra, do you know that there were bishops from Anatolia and from Syria who were popes in Rome? And she said, yes, of course, that was before you started the schism. I never knew the Romans started the schism. I always thought the others started the schism. So
Filioque.
That was the only doctrinal change. So that so there is a dialectical thing, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. That means the Godhead differentiates itself into the Father and the Son. There's an antagonism which then is reconciled in the Spirit. So the Spirit comes from the Father, but the West, and do it quite dialectically correct, also let him come from the Son. So that is the filioque. The Spirit comes from the Father and from the Son. Now, this Trinitarian unfolding, that history of the Godhead, is not there in Judaism, and it is not there in Islam. But when you have smart people like Küng, it will be there anyway. Because when you read the Torah and the book Genesis, you'll see there is, of course, the Creator God is there, but He speaks, and He speaks, and there's lights, and He speaks, and there are the animals and so on. So there is the Word, and the Spirit is floating over the abyss. The Spirit is there too. So it needed something else later on, to discover and organize all this, but it is somewhat there. But the main difference between the incarnation, it makes that difference between Jews and Islamic people and Christians and so on. But so from a Jewish point of view, they may say, or an Islamic point of view, really say, these are the three religions of the book. And therefore we are the Abrahamic community, and so you should love each other because we are all the religions of the book. Did something come down? Oh, okay. But the Christians will say, no, we are not the religion of the book. We are the religions of the Son. That means of this Jesus. So we don't have a book, but we have a human being, Jesus of Nazareth. And God has become incarnated in Jesus and so on. But smart Christians would say, but you Jews, you have an incarnation too, because the Torah. That means God becomes somehow present in the community in the Torah, which you put in the tabernacle, and the Christians have a tabernacle too, and they put Jesus into the tabernacle, the bread and the wine. So with the Jews, you have Torah in the tabernacle, and you have an eternal light before the tabernacle. And the Catholics, both Catholics, also have an eternal light right before the tabernacle. So you see there's a similarity, but you also see what happens. That means a person has taken the place of a book. Now, when the Archangel Gabriel, brought the word of Allah to Muhammad in Revelation and so on, then he dictated it, and it was put into a book. So that is also a kind of incarnation. That means a kind of being present in the community, and the Imam learns it by heart, so it becomes present in the Imam too, who then can say it by heart and so on. So if one wants to see, that some things which sound very strange, like the incarnation, one can see, that, but it is not so completely outlandish, because there is the issue of theophany. The theophany means God's appearance. So with the Christian, God appears in that person. With Judaism, he appeared already, not so much in Moses, but in that what he heard, in the Word, and in the Torah, and so on. And in the Islam, it is also not Muhammad really, but what he received, the Word. And there is a double revelation in Islam. There is the Word as it is in God, but then there is the Word which becomes physical in terms of the Quran, which must not be changed, and so on and so on. So the theophany element is there in all three Abrahamic religions. That means the way how God becomes present for the community, in the community, and so on. So this was the thing with the schism there in the West. So what I said was, that there was really one religion in that reawakening Europe, in these cities there. So then you have Paris, you have Cologne, you have Mainz, and so on and so on. All these were Roman cities along the Danube, along the Rhine River, and it went to southern England too, like London and so on. So that is where the limes went, the boundary between the Roman Empire and these Germanic tribesmen. And there you have all the temples. You have the Mithras temples, where Mithras comes from the Persian religion. Mithras is one of the seven spirits around Ahura Mazda, the god of light, who is the predecessor of Yahweh. And you have then Ahura Mazda, the father of lies and the murderer of men. That is the predecessor of Satan in the Old Testament, not Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, and in the New Testament, and in the Holy Quran. So, and this Mithras was then replaced in the Roman Empire by the Christ. Constantine wanted to conquer the city of Rome, march over the Milvian Bridge, and he had a vision in the sun, which was the sign of Mithras, which is the religion of his father. The cross appeared, which was the symbol of Christianity, and which, by the way, when the Orthodox and the Christians and the Catholics make the sign of the cross, they make it a little bit different, but it is a combination of the cross and the Trinity. That means who is crucified in the Trinity. So they say the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. So you have the Trinity and you have the cross. It's not the Father who is crucified. It's not the Son who is crucified. But it is the Son who is crucified. That means God goes out of himself into this creation, into this man, into this poor man who is then crucified, tortured by the rich people, but at the same time he is rescued again. That means the God returns to himself again. That is the idea of the Trinity, which then Hegel took over in his philosophy of history, namely that slaughter bench, that Golgotha of history, is the means between the God on one side and the realm of freedom which Marx took over. So that means it is in this middle realm where the slaughter bench and the Golgotha takes place, where the revolution takes place, where it becomes ugly, where good people go under, where good nations can go under, where the class struggle takes place, and so on. But not at the last word, but it is the middle term, so to speak, A, B, C. So it is the antithesis, the middle term, through which the God mediates himself and with this realm of freedom, which then Marxism took over in a secularized form. So we cannot understand those modern Enlightenment movements without seeing the background where it comes from originally.
So, Rudy, what did Fromm wanted to say in the Dogma of Christ, in the sense that, didn't he have this basic class analysis when it came to Fromm, that somehow it started off as a revolutionary peasant working class movement, but then as it became more Europeanized or more Hellenistic, that it became sort of incorporated within the class structure, that it somehow was co-opted by the powerful?
Right, that is the Marxist theory in general, right? That's the theory of Engels too, who wrote about the farmer wars and so on. He remembered again Münzer, Thomas Münzer, which the Protestant Catholics had completely forgotten. And then Bloch, and there we come to the critical theory. And Bloch then wrote a book on Thomas Münzer, and with this, my friend in Canada, that's what we did in Dubrovnik on our first meeting there, and he presented something on Thomas Münzer. So Thomas Münzer was also in Wittenberg, like Luther, and then the farmers asked him, to help out. So he left the priesthood, he married, he protested for the injustices of the fourth estate. So what I just described, the cities, that's the third estate. But under the third estate, you have the fourth estate of the workers who were not in the guilds really, but did the handiwork and the dirty work and so on and so on. So the farmers, Thomas Münzer became a spokesman for the farmers. And first Luther, who represents the third estate. So it is very important to see that the Protestantism is a third estate thing. This is a third estate country, which at the same time is Protestant. Therefore, it's so important that we are more religious than the Europeans are, and so on. It really plays a different role here. So if you take the class thing, right, this is important now. Marx emphasized, but so did Adam Smith. I mean, Marx did not invent it. There were classes, and after Marx is dead, there are still classes. Even if you say today, to hell with Marxism, you still have the class problem, and you have it in Congress every day. So now, the issue then, when you look in terms of classes, you also will do that in terms of the New Testament, and Fromm did this now. Fromm wrote a book, about the Old Testament is not good, because that means to say to the Jew, you are old, we are new, you passed away. So one has to call it the Hebrew Bible. That's better. So, and the Hebrew Bible was written by middle-class Jews. So for Fromm, the prophets and Moses, they were not fourth estate people, they were third estate people. And then Christianity becomes an expression of the fourth estate. So what you have in the Sermon on the Mount, or no rich man can enter the kingdom of God, or you have to sell everything in order to get into the kingdom, and that in the kingdom there is no marriage, in the kingdom there are no classes, in the kingdom there is no poverty, and so on. That is very rebellious. And Bloch calls them then the revolt in Christianity. So Christianity is, and my new book, which I write, is the polemics and the revolution in Christianity, in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, by the way, and in other religions as well. So, and polemics comes from polemos. Polemos means war. So the whole war issue, even the thing, is Islam so violent? Is Islam peace or whatever? Once a rabbi down there, he told me, if we would really preach the Ten Commandments, we would be revolutionary, because it has become quite normal, to lie all day long, to kill people out there which they don't function, and to steal, the rubber in Vietnam, and the coffee in El Salvador, and the oil in Iraq, and so on and so on. So if you would turn that around, if the rabbi would really preach, he would really preach the very opposite of what exists, and it would be revolutionary. So would be the imam, so would be the priest, and so on. But with Christianity, so on, that's Fromm's thesis there. So he says that Christianity is, of course, more rebellious. It is, as Nietzsche would say, it's a slave rebellion. like something like Spartacus, that Spartacus would be more secular, and you know the story of Spartacus, and then the question is, what's the difference between Jesus and Spartacus, and so on. So Spartacus was around the time of Jesus. He organized the slave rebellion, and he marched through the country, and he made a contract with the illegal navy there in the Mediterranean, and they were supposed to transport him, and they didn't. So I think he wanted to go to the south, up to the north, and they didn't transport him, and then the army came and mopped him up, and 10,000 slaves under Spartacus were crucified at the Via Appia. So Jesus is not the only one who was crucified there. Thousands, millions of people were crucified. So the Via Appia between Rome, where we are going, between Rome and the ocean there, that is where they all crucified. And then the question is, what happened to Spartacus? So one version is that Spartacus fell in battle, and Hans Küng and the Christians want him to have fallen in battle, because if Spartacus was crucified, then he was too similar to Jesus, and that's what they don't want. There, you have to see, when anybody writes history or whatever, we want to make ourselves sensitive. There was a discussion tonight about that pipeline from Canada here through the country, and there is a government report, and tonight there was an environmentalist there, and he said, who wrote that report there of the government? The government is not so neutral as you think. As a matter of fact, an oil company wrote the report. That means who want to have the pipeline and build the pipeline and so on. So that means one has to, when you have a scientist, we think, science, that's really the truth. But then if you have a scientist of the consumers, he says one thing. If you have scientists of the producers, the capitalists, another thing. If you have a scientist of the government, even if he's not corrupt, then he again says something else. So there goes the objectivity of science. Yeah.
It was a really interesting documentary. It was on Frontline, on the football concussions.
Mm-hmm. I watched part of that last night.
Yeah, it made me really disgusted to watch the Super Bowl this weekend. But the science that was coming out, right, that was paid for by the football league was, directly, and basically it was an intimidation thing to scare the other scientists who were actually finding brain damage and not reporting it.
Exactly.
It's about who has the power to be able to.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for us as sociologists, we have always to think in terms of sociology of sociology. So when we have working class boys here coming into our sociology department, sociology as we do it here is a third estate thing. It comes from Kant, and it has a long tradition, and so on, up to Parsons, and so on, and so on. But it is all what we could say then on the right. That means it is all a bourgeois self-defense in a certain sense. It's apologetical, So, but we very often think, it's a science, and it's objective, and it stands there. In reality, there are scientists who produce that science. And so what we really do, a working class guy comes into the sociology department, and he has to think differently. He must not think any longer, like a member of the precariat, as they call it now, not proletariat, but precariat. And they turn him around, and he becomes a good sociologist if he participates in this defense of the third estate. Our Constitution is third estate. The Congress is third estate. We have no labor party, and so on. We had a talk on Monday. There were some people that said, I never thought about that. One said, I never thought about it when I was 60 years old or whatever, that we don't have a labor party. Why does everybody else have a labor party? We don't. Well, because we are more a third estate country than anybody else. Right? And we managed it, the third estate managed it, that never there were some labor parties. We had them before. So, as a matter of fact, there was even a presidential candidate who was a Catholic, and who made it. He got 1 million or 2 million votes or so running for the presidency, but then he lost anyway. So, and the Social Democratic Party was sometimes the Socialist Party in some states, and so it's not entirely that way. So we always have to be, as correct as possible. So, but overall, and as we see the whole picture now, there is no Labour Party which would say we need this unemployment compensation for 1.5 million people for the next 5 years or whatever, or we have to need the food stamps and so on. It is good-hearted liberals on the left of the Democratic Party who push things which otherwise are done in the social democracies. in Sweden and Norway and Denmark and so on. So, but let's go back to Dustin's question there, what has happened. That means Jesus was a poor man, but you see, when you look at Parsons, who represents bourgeois sociology, he says Jesus was a middle-class man. And he says the exact opposite, of what Fromm says, or what Marx says. And if you make him into a middle-class guy, also had poverty and had a farm or had a boat or whatever, then you don't understand anymore where this radicality comes from, where this polemics comes from, where that revolutionary stuff comes from. So, but according to this, to Fromm, he was radical. He came from another class than the prophets. Therefore, he was already more radical than the other prophets were. And then what happens then? There is, and one day I mentioned that there was in the church newspaper here, there was a priest who is our seminary director, and he attacked the Time article of the Pope, about the Pope in the Time. There was one in September, and then the Pope in December became the person of the year. It's worthwhile to look at that if you want to. So now this priest there, he got very upset about this article, because he said the article emphasizes the Pope's care for the poor, and the poor, and the poor, and so on. But the article forgets completely worship and evangelization, or worship or doctrine. When you translate this, into Habermasian language, then it means a religion has a cognitive aspect, it has a moral aspect, and it has an expressive aspect. So the religion, doctrinal, Allah and so on, Yahweh has created the world and so on, doctrine. That's the cognitive aspect of religion, according to Habermas. And then you have a moral thing, so God gives commandments, you cannot steal, you cannot murder, and so on. That's the moral thing. And then you have the expressive thing, that is the liturgy, the dancing in the temple, the ceremonies in the temple in Jerusalem, and even in the mosque, and in the synagogue, and in the churches, and so on. So that is where the faith is confessed to, where it is witnessed in symbolisms of all kinds. And so therefore the man there, this Baron is his name, the priest's name, and so on, suddenly becomes outraged about the philosopher Kant. Now this is amazing, because our philosophy department seldom makes it to Kant, and so there suddenly that appears in the church paper. And what has this Kant done? He has reduced religion to ethics. He has emphasized ethics so much that people don't know what worship is anymore. And that worship, the only purpose of worship and doctrine is to make you a good person. So the main thing for Kant is that you are a good person, and it does not matter what you believe or whatever. So it's a distortion of Kant now. But we want to, do justice in the discourse to the religious and this Enlightenment side. So Kant is an enlightener, Horkheimer is in the line of Kant. Habermas more and more, Kant, more than Hegel and so on. So the whole Frankfurt School is Kantian. The Fromm is Kantian, Habermas, Honneth, and so on. They know, that the program of Hegel was to overcome Kant, and he has overcome Kant in some ways. But there is still enough in Kant to preserve. And so when they come to this country and talk with the liberals and so on, they are very Kantian. So that means that priest, is, and I wrote him in the new book there, I put him into the new book there. He is one of those religious people who are not willing to mobilize the humanistic potential in the religions. That's what Fromm wants. Fromm's program is not to say Catholics give up your Catholicism, Muslims give up your Islam or whatever. But what he says, if you are comfortable in your faith, stay in your faith. And then try to mobilize, to activate the humanistic potential which is in these religions. And that is what this priest Bern and many, many others who read him and follow him and so on do not want to do. Now, many have done it, right? So Karl Barth has done it, and Küng has done it, and Metz has done it, and Gutierrez has done it, the liberation theologians. And they like him. Fromm quotes them. He quotes Karl Rahner, the Catholic top theologian. He quotes the Küng too, and as people who mobilize the humanistic element. Now, for all these religious people, the humanistic element remains connected to the theological one. They become humanists without betraying their theological foundation. But it is a shift in the whole thing. So Horkheimer would say what they did to Jesus, and that's Dustin's point there, was they shifted from mimesis to cult, from mimesis to worship. That is a Kantian type of thing in a certain sense. So Jesus said, and I quoted it today, he said, "Don't call me Lord, Lord, but do what I say. If you follow my word, which is the Sermon on the Mount, then you are like a man who builds a house, and then the waters are coming, and the storms are coming. Building a house, but the house is built on rock, and it doesn't fall apart. But those who shout, Lord, Lord, to have this liturgy, but they don't do what I say, they are like an idiot," Jesus said, like a stupid man who builds his house on sand. So when the flood comes, and Jesus can become very poetical, when the flood comes and when the gales are running against the house and so on, then it floats away and so on. So here it is very clear that Jesus emphasizes mimesis. Follow what I say in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, the Sermon on the Mount has a prayer, because the priest makes the argument that Time magazine is wrong because the Pope is not only with the poor, but he prays also, hours in the morning, hours in the afternoon, hours at night, and so on. So that is true, right? So in the Sermon on the Mount, there is pray, Our Father, you are in heaven, and so on. But there is this one prayer, and all the rest of the Sermon on the Mount is about ethical commands, Don't hate your enemy, Don't take revenge, eye for eye, and so on. Don't take an oath, Don't murder, not even in your heart. Don't commit adultery, and so on. So therefore, the ethical element, which Kant emphasized so much, is really emphasized by the founder himself. And so what happened in early Christianity, what the church fathers did, the Greek church fathers, the Roman church fathers, is they shifted from mimesis to cult. That means Jesus is not only the subject who teaches, like Socrates and so on, but he becomes the object of worship. Lord, Lord, see, and he becomes equal to the Father, and so on and so on. This shifts away then from the ethical part, and thereby Christianity loses its polemics, uses its revolutionary, its critical character, and can more and more be co-opted in terms of beautiful liturgies and so on. I took Mike Ott, was a student of mine, and you saw his picture there, and I took him to Switzerland, and we went to Einsiedeln, which is a monastery, Benedictine monastery, and we went into the Mass. They had a high Mass, and there were all these pictures, baroque, unbelievable angels flying all over the place, and then holy smoke. Went through the whole cathedral, and hours, and suddenly poor Mike Ott, the Protestant minister, run out of the cathedral. He said, I can't stand it anymore. So Protestantism, it's a purification element. It has it already in itself, and therefore the Frankfurt School is a little bit closer to Protestantism than Catholicism in that. There are other things where they prefer the Catholics, but in terms of this, they think that there was Catholicism and Protestantism, and then comes the critical theory and so on. So they did away, Calvinism particularly, did away with the pictures and the images and the icons and so on, and became much more prosaic, and so liturgy was played back. the sacrament of the Eucharist became just a symbol, while for Luther it is still real. Christ is really there if you are a believer, and for the Catholics, Christ is there even if you are not a believer. So that means Luther made a correction. The Catholics were objectivistic. He added a subjective element to it. The Council of Trent, followed him a little bit by saying there must at least be one other person in the room when the priest celebrates the Mass, because before the Trent Council, the priest could celebrate the Mass without anybody there. And but even today, when they put bread and wine into the tabernacle, independently of the community or whatever, that is Christ in the tabernacle. Then they take him and camp to the hospital, to the sick people, and so on. So there, even little details play an important role in all of this. Hegel is behind all this too. He taught once in Berlin in the university, and he said, if the Catholics celebrate and a little bit of the bread falls to the ground and a mouse comes and eats that bread, then the Catholics have to kneel down before the mouse and worship it.
Who said that?
Hegel.
Hegel said
Yeah.
that?
And then when the mouse defecates, they even have to, but he said that in Latin so that not everybody could understand it. They have to kneel even before that. And the Bishop of Berlin was horribly upset, and he went to the cultural minister, who was a good friend of Hegel, and said he had to fire this guy. And so the cultural minister forced Hegel to, it was a Protestant university, Protestant state of Prussia, but forced Hegel to explain himself why he did that. And he said, well, I had to make clear to my students, what the difference is between the Catholic teaching of transubstantiation and the Lutheran teaching of consubstantialization. That means that transubstantiation means the priest, by the way, not as a magician, as Katja, who's a witch, would say. She would say, the priest does this by making the cross, and suddenly that changes there. The form of the bread remains the same, but the substance changes it. That is the transubstantiation. The substance is transformed. And but it's not the priest. The priest prays. The Orthodox priest and the Roman Catholic priest and the Anglican priest. They're the only priests left. All the other ministers are not priests. So he prays, the epiclesia that's called, and then the Spirit comes down and transforms. So it's God who transforms the bread and the wine. It's not the priest. So if the priest would do it, he would indeed be a magician. The priest is a leftover of the magician, but not in that instance. It is not right. So nevertheless, so Hegel said, and I have to make that clear, and that example with the mouse was the best way how he could make it clear in the whole thing. So there was no follow-up, but a priest came in the morning the next day, and when he lectured again, and at that time the professor had a vestment on like the pastor today, like a priest today, and he had also 2 candles standing on his pulpit. And then so Hegel then read it. He didn't do it by heart, but while he was reading, he changed it all the time. That means, when he went to the philosophy of law or whatever, whenever he read something, he said, well, that's not entirely right. Then he corrected it on the side there, which took 5 minutes where he didn't say anything. It was a strange way to do it. In antiquity, he had to sing. So Augustine, for instance, was a professor of rhetoric, had to sing, and when he, like the priest sings now in church still, so when he had a lung illness, Augustine had to retire from the professorship in Milano. So, but Hegel didn't sing anymore, but he had a very slow and bothersome presentation, and he had the dialect, the Swabian dialect, which didn't fit into Berlin, which was a crucifixion for all the students who had to listen. Well, there was a priest there. I sat there, and he stared at Hegel all the time. So while he was stuttering around there, he noticed that he was always staring at him. And then he said, "You cannot stare me from my pulpit here." Then the priest was angry and ran out. So there was always great tension between. I mean, the Catholics finally did write big books about Hegel too, but because there was a crypto-Catholicism in him. He wanted to become Catholic at a certain point, but people who became Catholic were so ugly that he did not want to join them. And the people who converted were romantics. So we have to see that it's Fromm thing too, the antagonism between the individual and the collective. So and Fromm traces all that wonderfully. So the Renaissance and the Reformation emancipated the individual from the community, from the church, from the state, from the family. So the individual became, a reality in himself. And but by 1800, that's Hegel's time, the individual felt awfully lonely, because if you separate yourself from all these communities, you have to make all the decisions. You have to think everything through yourself. You can still see today, when you see a Catholic priest in Europe, he looks like a child. Even the old cardinals, they have these boyish type of faces. They're 60 years old and look still like boys and so. But when you have a Protestant minister, you see that he has to fight the whole thing through himself. And he has, you can see in his face the struggles he has to go through. But masses of people, felt just lonely, left alone with themselves and all these decisions. And so there was a back to Rome movement around 1900 and 1800, and so a lot of romantics went over. But Hegel and his friend Goethe resisted it; they didn't go. Goethe hated the cross thing. As I just said, Hegel did not, because the word historical process was a process of the slaughter bench and the Golgotha of history. So, but neither of them become Catholic. But Hegel had the temptation to, but it was the people there were too ugly, and he didn't want to go with them. So
I mean, physically ugly, or were they?
No. I mean, as intellectuals or what. Many of them attacked them. He attacked them. They were just ugly intellectuals. They said the wrong things all the time.
Yeah.
And, what he called shallow. The word Hegel used almost in every sentence. The German word Seicht. Seicht means Seicht. Seicht means superficial. That means he would call our sociology today totally superficial. As a matter of fact, the positivistic university wants to be superficial. We want people to make observations, to stay on the surface and see things. These are the facts and the data and so on. That's all superficial. You are not superficial when you use the dialectical notion. You elevate facts, isolate facts into a totality, into a wholeness. When you do that, then for Hegel you would have depth, your thinking would have depth. While when you would do that in your dissertation, your teachers would say that this is mysticism, and then you should not do this as a scientist, so that you have to stay with the facts and the data and the statistics. That's all superficial.
Well, I would argue that we do to an extent. I know we're definitely very much a positivistic social department, but to a large extent, tying back into these larger concepts and theories with that research is still very important.
I mean, it's part of that would be a good thing. But let me give you an example. For instance, what that means. Hegel thought, that superficial means that your subjective reason cannot break through to the objective reason or notion of the things out there, that abstractions move in between, or details are moving in between, and therefore you cannot penetrate this objective logical reality. So concretely, family, for instance, the Pope is calling in a synod, and he wants to discuss the family. So you can look at the family and take something out. You can look at abortion, or you can look at divorce, or whatever. These are all particulars, and you can get so fascinated by these particulars that you don't see really the wholeness of the family. which for Hegel is, of course, Trinitarian, like everything else. So you could say, a Kabbalist would say, everything is Kabbalah. Böhme, for instance, would say, everything is Trinity. And the same thing Hegel could say, that he somehow tamed Jakob Böhme. So everything is Trinitarian. So the family as such realizes itself in the marriage, in the property, and the education of the children. Now, you can concentrate on this, and you can see where it becomes dysfunctional. So our sociologists use the word dysfunctional. As a matter of fact, the Marxists in Croatia, at a certain point when I was there, suddenly used the word dysfunctional, and I said, don't do it, stay with the dialectics, don't do it, because you get already, into this balanced type of theory, and it is completely opposite to whatever you want to do. It was the beginning of the end, and little vocabulary came through. The same man who came from Moscow, he would say, well, are you still talking about surplus value? I said, I bet I do, and you better do too, otherwise tomorrow you'll be in the other camp. And so it was. So you can see in little words how the mind is changing slowly. So nevertheless, dysfunctional, right? So we say a marriage is dysfunctional. What does that really mean? So somebody the social worker goes into a family, and that's a family, it's a family Siebert. But then he sees, they hate each other, they throw, furniture against each other, and so on. And then he says, that is not a family. Well, it is a family, and it's not a family. So somehow even the positivist has still some metaphysical hang-ups, so that he has a certain idea of what the family is, and what he sees empirically on the surface doesn't fit that whole thing. So for Hegel, the real family within this house is a real family when it is in conformity with the notion of the family, with the wholeness of the family. If it is not, then it can still exist. So the sociologist sees there is an existing family, but that existing family is not real. So there's a difference between existence and being real. Something what exists is real only when it conforms to itself. So sometimes we say, a girl may say to a boy who looks very nice, say, are you really real? So to be real for an individual organism and so on means to be healthy physically and so on, then the organism is identical with itself. That is called a metaphysical truth or logical truth, which we have lost. It's not present anymore for the positivist or whatever. There are only residuals present of that. And in everyday life, for instance, we say, look how beautiful the sun rises, and it doesn't rise. The earth turns. So sometimes we stay very conservative, in spite of the fact that we have scientific insights which say the opposite. So, okay, so that, we have to see with Fromm and all these people. I take my students, to the hospital there, the psychiatrist. Suddenly the psychiatrist says, boy, I had a patient yesterday. He was really off the square. What does it mean to be psychologically off the square? What the hell is the square? Well, the square is a well-functioning psyche. And to be off the square is a completely dysfunctional psyche. Somebody is on drugs, somebody knows what else he does. So now, this guy, these psychiatrists, they didn't even know that it's not Freud, but that it was Marx with the opium of the people. So their education is very pitiful, but he uses that word square, and without knowing what he's saying, he still holds on to it. So there are sometimes theological, philosophical, mythical elements still in science which they are not really fully aware of it. But it is helpful for him to use that. Boy, he was really off the square. Would mean in Aristotelian, Platonic, or Hegelian terms would mean his psyche was not conform to that what the notion of the psyche is. But that, to the subjective reason, to break through to the objective reason of the psyche or the family or whatever, that is what is blocked. So therefore, the old tradition, the natural law tradition, which Hegel still has, the bourgeoisie had a form, and we had it for 1,000 years from the Stoics and so on. It is still present in Hegel, but we have no natural law position. You cannot go to Congress and argue in the terms of natural law, The natural law rests in inclination, the inclination to life, right to life, duty to live. That's where it comes from. These right to life people are natural lawyers, but they cannot make their point clear anymore because nobody can break through anymore to what the nature is of things or whatever. Or they misunderstand it in the social Darwinistic way or whatever. So, and that's, a lot of our struggles have to do with that. We only have positive laws made by Congress. We have no other laws. If you want to say, but this law of the state of Michigan, is a wrong law, or the death penalty law, it's a wrong law, then you have a very hard time. You have to do translation. You have to translate out of the religious language or the metaphysical language into the positivistic one. And so, but nevertheless, the last thing which we said was this thing there with Hegel and the thing of the transubstantialization and consubstantialization, which means then that Luther would say, yes, the body of Christ, that is real, but it's only real if there is a believer. So there must be a subject there. So Luther tried to overcome the subject-object antagonisms, and that went on then, of course, into Marxism and so on, or into Bloch and Fromm and so on. The criticism is, that these metaphysicians said that the subject and the object are already together, and that it's just little abstractions which prevent us and so on. But they would say much more radically that it's not together, that this is not true. The same way when Christians say we are redeemed already, and we will be completely redeemed and so on, they would say that's a lie. We are not redeemed at all. This is not a redeemed society, otherwise we wouldn't kill people all the time, cheat people all the time. It's completely unredeemed, and that's hard to take, So with the parousia delay that the Messiah doesn't come, then the Catholics would say, and maybe the Protestants too, and maybe the Jews don't, and Muslims don't, I think, but these Christians say, we are redeemed and not yet redeemed, but we are already redeemed. It's a partial redemption, and but this partial redemption, that's a lie. The subject and the object have not come together at all, and so that we can go into that later. So, but Dustin's thing once more. So something has happened to Christianity. It turned into what Kierkegaard called Christendom, and Adorno started Kierkegaard, and so they all know him. There was a student of Hegel who turned against Hegel. So the issue is the shift, which we said, from mimesis to worship, that Jesus became more and more somebody to pray to, Lord, 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 and less somebody to be followed, whose teaching was to be followed. So Protestants here in this country, they say, well, Christ is my Savior, and we just say, what about the Sermon on the Mount? Well, that was just told us in order to show us how sinful we are. But that's not what Jesus taught. What Jesus taught, don't say, Lord, Lord, and so on, but do what I say, and that was the Sermon on the Mount. That included prayer, but all the rest had something to do with the poor who would enter the kingdom and so on. Even if he would say, as the conservatives say all the time, you will have the poor always with you, always. That means when the woman came and put oil on his feet and on his hair, and then cleaned him up with her hair, then Judas and others who had the money there, they said, what a waste that is. We could have given it to the poor. Damn it, hypocrisy. They want to keep it for themselves, but they just used the poor as an argument. And so then Jesus said, she did this. She does that for my funeral already. She anticipates my funeral, and he lets it happen, and says that in this context, you will have the pure with you, but you will not have me. But this always is very short, because he thought in the next generation the Messiah would come, or later on he says only the Father knows it, but it was something which would come close. So And he said, give to the emperor. That emperor wouldn't last very long. So during that time, we may very well give him what it belongs to him. So all the things which Jesus says have to be understood eschatologically. If you leave that eschatology out, then all the statements become distorted. Okay, so nevertheless, the Christianity became, we can say, co-opted, right? So that is how it happened, what we call the dialectic of religion. We have a dialectic of enlightenment. Adorno and Horkheimer wrote that, and Fromm is part of the critic of this dialectic of enlightenment. But there is also a dialectic of religion. The religion of love turns into a religion of crusaders and killing Jewish people, killing Arabs all over the place, killing 10 million witches and all this. So, and then also Christianity becomes from a religion of truth into a religion of ideology. So the positivists have another idea of ideology than the critics. So ideology means for a normal American a combination of ideas and values, or it means the identification of a certain cause why things are as they are. So my son, the lawyer in New York, told me that the poor in New York are poor because they don't have the Protestant work ethics. That's ideology. And this ideology is false consciousness, and it is a masking of class interests. The rich in New York want to say it's not our fault. The poor are not poor because we have stole all the money from them and have it here now in our bonuses. Now in January and February they divide the bonuses again. $1 million, $3 million bonus, and so on. Well, if you have $3 million without any work having done, these $3 million have to be covered by work. And it's over there who did the work and didn't get it, and the bastard now gets it and hasn't worked for it. That's it. Instead of that, they say, no, they don't have the right work ethics. See how horrifying this is. Yes?
The very interesting thing that happens is when the people who are actually in that, disadvantaged state and they're unemployed, etc., take on that false consciousness, that ideal that
right. Exactly.
I have a friend who's, wickedly conservative and unemployed.
Yeah.
And he'll stick to the bitter end, arguing that it's just, people have to work harder, but,
Yeah, right. And Fromm and these people would explain this, of course, because the people, the masses of the people internalize the consciousness of the ruling class, of their own masters, It happened even in the concentration camps. It was discovered that the people, the victims suddenly began to think like the SS men did, and did strange things in order to rescue themselves. So that is what happened. Christianity became the ideology of the ruling classes, of the feudal lords, and then of the slaveholders first, and then of the capitalists. And we have that with Mike Ott here. He was a minister of the Church of Christ, who had a parish, a wonderful pastor. He worked 80 hours a week and to funerals and went to the hospitals and cared for the poor and so on. He had a contract with two steelwork owners, and the contract said to preach the gospel. So he preached the gospel, and he said, no man can enter the kingdom of God. You cannot serve capital and God and so on. And then they told him that this was not their gospel. But he said, it's here, it's written there. It doesn't matter what's written there. This is not your gospel. We didn't make that contract. And so he left before they fired him. So that means, they want to have a certain church, and they're willing to pay that church the heating bill and all that, if that church does what they want it to do. Okay, so, but back to that guy there, this priest Bern and Kant there. We said already, that the issue of the opium religion, which Marx said came from Hegel, who applied it to Hinduism, but Hegel learned it from Kant. And Kant writes it in his theory of religion. Kant says, if somebody's dying and you call the priest and the minister, then he should not simply console you and make you feel good. Don't call him for that. But call him in order to sharpen your conscience so that you can still see if there is something you can do, put right, if you can do something good now. So that means for Kant, opium religion was a religion which consoled in such a way that the conscience was dulled. And this critique, of course, is an Enlightenment critique, and Marx did not attack Christianity. He attacked the Christians who did the opposite of their Christianity. You are taught, you should not take revenge or whatever, until you go to court and take revenge again, and so on. And he said, why do you bourgeois in London and in Washington and Berlin, why do you make a liar out of him, that means out of Jesus of Nazareth, with every word you say and everything you do, and so on. So it is not an attack on Jesus of Nazareth, it is an attack on those who have his name not doing it. So they say Lord, Lord in their churches, and they have beautiful music, and Marx took their children to the music, and the children then wanted to know what the music was about, and he said there was a poor man once, and the rich people murdered him. And the children learned that. They learned a certain notion of Christianity, an abused Christianity. And the children said, we were never tempted later on to fall for this false Christianity, for this opium religion. Our father made it impossible for us to fall for it. That brings us to Kant and that critique. And so when people don't feel good, in the Christianity which exists, then because this priest Bern and so on has, keeps enlightenment out, he which preaches an anti-enlightenment type of Catholicism. For many Protestants, humanism is something bad. It's something pagan. So Skinner is a humanist, doesn't believe anything, and Marx is a humanist, and they're all atheists and so on, which is not true, because there is a long tradition. I wrote my dissertation on a fellow, Michael Helding, and he was a follower of Erasmus of Rotterdam. Erasmus was a humanist, so was that bishop. So there were hundreds of them. They met through 50s and 30s. For 10 years they met, Protestant humanists and Catholic humanists, in order to get the church together again. And they failed in the end, but they were very close. There was a lay cardinal in Italy who had the same experience like Luther about justification and so on. So close they were. But it didn't work, because in the meantime the princes had already stolen the church property and the monasteries, and one could not hold it back anymore. So then it went and comes up here to 1,200 Christian groups and so on. And Luther never intended that. When Luther came home to Wittenberg, he was a little bit in exile there because they wanted to kill him. But he came back to Wittenberg, and suddenly all the churches here were devastated. All the little decorations in the church, they had all pulled them down, and he didn't want that. He wanted to reform the church. He did not want to split it up into innumerable things. But that has to be discussed too. If the Reformation would not have come, modern states would not exist. The church was so powerful that the states could not develop. They could only develop after the church power was broken, and the Reformation did break it. So therefore, today what you see there is a shadow of what it once was. But the main thing is, of this Kantian critique, because Horkheimer and all these people would say that opium religion, makes people feel good, so that they can live with a good conscience side by side with the slums, like we do here, the north side, and the slum in Flint, and the slum in Red Rapids, and the slum and the urban slums, and country slums, and so on. And we are perfectly all right to do this. When I came here, for years, I went into the slums there, and I gave talks, and the Sutton family was a black family. They protected me all the time. They were in control of the whole north side, and so on. Once we had even Democratic Party meeting, and they stole a car while we were sitting in there. So it's not a safe place there. So, but usually we don't go there, and we close up the cars. We lock the cars when we go there, and so on. So that one can live with a good conscience, can say Christ is my Savior, and feel good about this. That is, that's the wrong thing. That's false religion, and the Fromm and Habermas and so on are against this religion. And a woman told me she was in a class of Habermas, and she used some images and names for the absolute, and he got horribly furious and angry. You know, I thought we made it clear, you know, that we cannot have a reified type of a transcendence anymore. In spite of the fact that his wife, you know, works in the church. She's a church woman, Habermas's wife. And he has 2 daughters, and he gave Hebrew names to them, Rebecca and something else. So, I mean, he's not hostile to it, but wherever it becomes, you know, reified, or where it becomes opium or whatever, we can become quite furious. And, okay, so anything else? Dustin, have we answered your question?
Mm-hmm. I got a good sociological question for you.
Okay.
You know, even though we see the increasing secularization of the world, especially in the West, even to a certain extent, third world and whatnot, but, you know, Islam is the fastest growing religion by birth and by conversion. But yet, in Christendom, and at least in Christianity, you have 2 segments of it that are growing very rapidly, and one segment that is dying out very quickly. And the traditional Protestant churches are dying out very quickly. So like the one where I grew up in, the RCA, the Reformed Church of America. Now if you go to an early service there, it looks like an evangelical church with the hands up in the air and the drums playing and whatnot. But even though it's an old Calvinist church, you know, and so they have to do this game, play that marketing game in order to get young people back in, because they're either going to, the young people are either going to the evangelicals, the rock concert churches, or they're becoming Catholic. And so it's this strange dichotomy that, I mean, these are 2 forms of Christianity that seem to be very far apart, and yet those are the 2 that are growing. And so the question is, why is that? I mean, what is it about the traditional Protestant churches that are, you know, not attracting young people, that people aren't staying and whatnot, but somehow are going to these 2? Granted, in Catholicism you see it more in different parts of the world, that they're becoming more Catholic or something, say in Africa or whatnot, you know. Whereas in the West, you know, Catholics are losing the next generation, of course. But you know, I wonder why.
Yeah. I mean, we have this phenomenon of the lost generation, you know. I mean, online they have to go online, so almost tend to forget them there, but they seem ought to be Catholics or whatever. And they say, I grew up Catholic, and then they all lost it in the process, you know. So, the priests in St. Thomas More, they really try their best. There are 2 priests and the 2 nuns, and they have one pizza after the other, and still when I go to church, there's almost no student there. So, that is the same question which you have, but you have another question, why sometimes, you know, more orthodox, for instance, in Judaism, it's the orthodoxy which grows most,
right,
and not the conservatives and so on, you know. That means it could be that the antagonism between the Enlightenment on one side and the other side, you know, goes deeper and deeper, and that people, you know, are maybe alienated from that Enlightenment in a certain sense, you know. For instance, Katja up there is, you know, on one side an enlightened person, on the other side she is full of distrust and so on, down to Obamacare and everything.
Well, you know, Ratzinger made that same point in that book he did with Habermas, that it was only the Catholics and the evangelicals that are growing in terms of Christianity, where the rest of them are falling apart. But he doesn't ever give a real reason why that's the case.
Well, I mean, the evangelicals and the Catholics, they have even voted for the Bush administration twice, you know. And in spite of the fact that he has 150 people killed, you know, death penalty, and the Pope was against that, they still voted against him. And he started 2 wars, and they still voted against him. So one wonders, you know, it certainly has nothing to do with ethics in that sense, right? If they were really ethical, they would not have voted him in.
Yeah.
So, but it may have something to do with worship, right? This form of worship is consoling, you know. That may be it.
You know, I think that might be the case on the evangelical side, that it's more consoling. It's community. When you have very atomized society, it's more community. You're engaged in some kind of collective ritual. But, you know, with Catholicism, it was very interesting. When I took my students last year to Rome and Assisi, they all went there, and Athens, they all went there very secular, very critical of religion. But something happened in Assisi that didn't so much happen in Rome, but it happened in Assisi, where all of a sudden they were in the presence of a saint, and somehow the world became enchanting again. You know, so it's that old Weberian thesis of disenchantment. But somehow they became enchanted again. They felt like they were in sacred space for the first time, which they didn't feel in the Vatican. They felt like a museum. But there, you know, in that cathedral of St. Francis, they felt something. And yet it seemed kind of spooky, like the spookiness was there again, the unknown, the mystery all came there. And so I wonder if, you know, being in a consumer society where none of that is there, really, it's just, you know, a collection of stuff, all of a sudden that mystery comes in and they're attracted to that. So I can see how, at least for Catholicism on that side, that aspect would be appealing to people who grew up in a consumer society.
I mean, Habermas, and so we can bring Habermas in here, you know, he would say, something is missing, you know, the people are aware that something is missing. So this enchantment, you know, that may be missing, more of that. And then he asked the religious people to translate. We need new translators of that religious message, so that you meet those people who know that something is missing, and you know, that you can speak to them because you interpret differently. That is his solution. But so he also mentions, you know, that artist, which I mentioned very often in Zurich there, who, when he came toward his death, you know, asked the cathedral that he could put his coffin in there for 10 minutes. And then his partners, they was not married, they are not married anymore, they just, you know, they are just partners. Not homosexual, I mean heterosexual partners. And so, so then she was to read something, a text which he produced, and then they were going out and drink beer there and enjoy themselves, you know. So, but that is what is missing there. What is missing is that there is no conclusion. See, you have the notion, the judgment, and the conclusion. That's the Trinity, you know. That's Trinitarian thinking and so on. So the notion is there, the judgment is there, and then one cannot come to the conclusion. And you see that everywhere, like we have it, you know, in Chicago. When you go to Chicago River, you see all the skydivers I mentioned already, and they don't know how to end it up there, you know. So they put a cathedral on it, or a little temple on it, or a little something which they don't even know what they put on it. And some of them just despair, and they stop with 125 stories, and then you could make 50 more, but it makes no sense. It's the bad infinity. So the good infinity is missing. And so you have it with that poet, you know, but you have it with Brecht too. Brecht, in John of the Stock Market, he made, heaven knows, 10 or 20 endings. And it never ended the right way, you know. When you think of Abraham, he died and he was fulfilled in his life. His years, you know, 100 years old or more, and but his life had fulfilled him, and now he could peacefully go. And it's this what is missing. It remains in a judgment position, and the next step in the logic, which would mean a conclusion, you know, of the whole thing. It makes sense what I had, you know. And so someone just told me, you know, she's waiting for a second life. She believes in the transmigration of the soul or whatever, which is not in the Abrahamic religions usually. But she said, I made so many mistakes, you know, and then in that second life I will not make these mistakes, you know. I counseled her not to wait for the second one, but to correct the mistakes here already. And that is the Kantian position. That's what Kant meant, you know, to sharpen the conscience. You know you made mistakes, and now just see if you can correct something, you know. And so that's the Enlightenment position on religion. So you have this discrepancy, and Habermas's position would be that magic and witchcraft and so on, that was conquered by technology and science. But there's something else, and that something else is the extra everyday events. Thank you very much. Extra everyday events breaking into the everyday life.
The life world.
So into the life world, because you get your thing with your cancer, brain cancer, and nobody can do anything and so on. And I have that with the students, so they have left their Catholicism, but they said, my father lost his faith because his brother died in a terrible way with cancer and so on. My brother, you know, was young, or I had some illness and so on. it's always this theodicy thing. So one question is that science cannot give an answer to these extra everyday events breaking into the normal everyday life world, or sociologically the normalization process does not work really in a secular type of society. So to some extent art has taken over to deal with these extraordinary things, like Kafka, for instance, or great writers, Dostoevsky or so. They deal with that. And I think for other people who have no sense for art or whatever, religion can still be a way and is not replaced, and Habermas says it will not be replaced for quite some time, That is this idea of Habermas of the post-secular society,
Right.
which must not be understood that post-secular means that Nietzsche and Marx and those Freud who believed that religion would wither away, that it doesn't go so fast as they thought. And Habermas does not see that this will change soon. So you could say that people's expectations, that any moment, that for instance in Cairn, her mother suddenly fell down the staircases, and broken, and it was so peaceful, so normal. Her husband had a snow blower with a propeller in, and he drove to it, almost cut her head off. And, that comes in a completely normal situation, retirement, they had a nice lake, and so on, there it is, So, and we all know that this can happen, in one form or the other. And that is what science cannot handle. Science can handle, magic. Magic meant that you try to change something without a tool. Now, science and technology have developed the tools of it, So we have the tools to conquer the enemy or to find food or whatever the magician or the fetishist wanted to do. So therefore, he has really disappeared, except the circus, magicians and so on. So it has come down in the world,
Right.
but religion hasn't, And so I would say that the theodicy problem is the main problem. But the interesting thing is that no religion at this moment has a theoretical answer for it. The Hegelian answer, and that means the answer of the Hebrews, the prophets, is somewhat barbarous in a certain way. I don't know how to express it as, but when you say Jeremiah, Jeremiah is in Jerusalem, and he prophesies to the king of Judah and Benjamin, that Nebuchadnezzar will come, the king of Babylon, and he will be destroying this thing, and it will take 70 years until they come back. He counsels the king to surrender. He said, if you don't surrender, he will butcher you. So he's very pessimistic. And then come other prophets who say, no, Jeremiah is wrong, he's the wrong prophet, Just defend yourself and the king will leave, See, the Egyptians are coming. So the Egyptians came, approached Jerusalem, then they saw Nebuchadnezzar and with his elephants and thought, that's too big, So the Egyptians withdrew again. But you see, God is not for the deist far away. He is present, He uses one nation in order to punish another nation. So he uses the Babylonians to punish the Jews because they sacrificed to Baal. They became idolatrists, and therefore they had to be punished, had to be disciplined. It is some kind of an educational process. But then, after Nebuchadnezzar has done that, then comes Cyrus and marches against Babylon, And he is so powerful that Babylon cannot even defend itself, and undoes everything what Nebuchadnezzar had done, and rebuilds the temple again and brings the Jews back, and so on and so on. So this Cyrus is a great man in the Hebrew Bible because of it. But so it goes all the time, That means, but what that means is, and it is described in horrible ways. Namely, the children will be butchered, the women will be butchered. We will have famine, and you will have diseases coming out. And that this all, can be some instrument for the divinity, to bring humankind to that realm of freedom and peace in the end. It's just overwhelming, And Adorno, has this where morality is a matter of immediate sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
So one could ask, Adorno, why do you think Auschwitz is so bad? But the question already would be barbarous,
Yeah, he says he won't deal with that question discursively.
Yeah, right. But I mean, how does he know, when the trial of God, in Auschwitz, they charge God because he broke the covenant. But then they argued too on the side of the defense of God, that God did all that to the Jews because what the Jews did to the Egyptians and so on and so on. There you have the same thing. Wiesel, brings all that up and so on. See, it may be logical, but one doesn't dare to say, the Japanese military elite, did these evil things in China and the Pacific. So then we got the Americans in, and the Americans punished them and put the 2 bombs on them and so on. So, but the next move is that the Americans, of course, have to suffer something for the horrible things they do. And then comes Bin Laden and he says, the brothers bombed New York, in order to show the Americans and give them a taste of what they are doing to other people and so on. So, see, I mean, it is a logical theodicy, this instrumental theodicy, but one doesn't really dare to do it because of the immediacy of...
the immediacy and the responsibility. I mean, where does responsibility lie? Usually the people who are making the decisions to kill massively, those are the ones who are responsible, but they're not the ones who pay the price.
Well, that's another thing, yeah. I mean, for instance, in Sodom, what about the children?
Right.
No text says what happened to the children of Sodom.
Mm-hmm.
All the Sodom people were obviously bisexual, because the children of the fellow there, daughters were married with them, so they had women and they had men at the same time, but they also had children from them, and they all went under in the 5 cities. So these things, are just overwhelming. So, I mean, my point is, so if people really still remain religious, in Catholicism or Evangelicals or Islam, etc., their religions, what is the theodicy of their religions? Theoretically, they have none, but practically they do. I mean, you can still say, I will die like Christ did. I will die like Socrates did. I will follow the way how Mohammed died in the arms of his beloved wife, or something like that. So they can, or I will die like Buddha did, conquering the will to life and so on. So they still have to offer practical theodicy solutions still, and that may be enough, for many people.
Yeah, I think it's too painful to go beyond that for, the common average believer.
Well, I mean, in Hegel you have a classical, theodicy thing. It's bombastic. That means the whole philosophy has only one purpose to solve that problem in theory, and it is 10,000 years of thinkers who are engaged, not only Leibniz and so on, to do that, But in the face of what we have experienced, the brain may say, this is a beautiful thing. But the rest of us, simply cannot go up to this. And when Küng then says, it is not God who punishes us, but we ourselves punish us, that is some kind of an opening toward the Enlightenment, So what does that mean now? He takes that away, that Yahweh is Sabaoth, the leader of the armies. Yahweh is the leader of the armies, So what remains then is that people commit idolatry and so on, and by doing that, they punish themselves, because it cannot go well if you have this idolatry of porno, idolatry of money, and idolatry of war and so on. You will go under, And there is, for the American mind, it is so difficult because they don't have that metaphysical idea of truth anymore. So the best thing is truth is correctness. So then they look at Noah, and they want to know if that is really correct. is that true? Means, was there really ark? Were all the animals in there? What did they eat? How long did it last? How many floods? Many floods. One of them, and so on. But all that passes by completely what Noah means. Noah means that the human species, fell away from its own truth. Like Marx would say, man is the only animal which does not reach its goal. That's what he wrote in his Abitur thing. So that what people did there outside of the ark, or the society did, it led to that. So in that sense you can say it's not God sends the flood or whatever, but you fell victim to nature again, flood or explosion or whatever, volcano and so on. The nature rebelled because you behaved in a certain way, right? And then, so it is a little bit more to the secular side than Hegel was. So Hegel was still too theological, too much Jewish, and so Küng is willing to open up, and everybody loves him, and therefore he got the doctorate in Ann Arbor and so on, Okay, so what we do now, is we use Habermas, or we use Fromm and so on, in order to talk about our problems. That is a very good thing, right? So that's how it ought to be, because we are not historians, we are sociologists, but we are sociologists who want to say something to where we are now, to the problems which we have. Okay, very good. Now, what is the time? What is our situation?
About 20 after 8.
Okay. Yeah, let's make a little break then, and then we can maybe take another question. But we can also look at these movies then. Maybe we have worked enough for today. So we will take up these questions the next time. You can read them already. You can decide already what you want to do, if you would like to write that paper on these two books, or if you rather want to answer the questions. We go a little bit further the next time, so we have 2 weeks for that. You can always start to do something if you want to. You can also wait for the next time. You can read the 2 books a little bit more, and so on. Right? Is that a good deal?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
I did have a question about the death study books. You have a very extensive list of books.
You can choose whatever you want to.
For anything from that list.
Yeah, right.
I noticed on there you had some more.
We limited it a little bit by saying, maybe those 3 people which we have singled out would be, but you are not bound to do that.
Okay. I know whether it's this exam or the next one or the final
It would be
one.
the same.
I would like to go into maybe even both Orwell and Huxley, The Brave New World in 1984.
Okay, yeah.
I need to read A Brave New World. I have the book sitting on my bookshelf, but I haven't yet finished it.
Yeah.
The first
I mean,
chapter.
that is what we. There is one question here about the goals, the alternative futures of which they still have, or if they still have them. And one of them is future number 1, the totally administered society, and that is Huxley, right? That is Orwell and so on. That's the totally administered society. And then you have the other one, it's the war society, and the third one is the reconciled society, in which these antagonisms would be overcome. And that was their original goal. And Fromm still calls that the city of being. The city of being is number 3. And the industrial society, that is number 1 for him. And then the whole book on destructiveness of man's death drive, it's the whole book there. That is about number 2, war, and that is also these talks there about the psychological reasons of war. So these 3 alternative futures which you have on your roadmap, also in the back there.
The roadmap is on the website, right?
Yeah, it's on the website, That's very important there. It helps, with the categories. And so what we ask is that Fromm and Habermas and Harnath, are these alternative futures still visible for them? Are they still present, right? You can take, some of these books there too, Okay. So what we want to do now is we can go on simply with this book there, and then concentrate the next time and look at some of these fascist things there in order to understand why the critical theory exists in the first place. Because they went back to Europe in order to prevent fascism. They were here and they were afraid that fascism would come. At that time, Americans wanted to send the Jews to Alaska. Hitler wanted to send them to Madagascar. So it was the same thing, and they were always afraid that this would happen here too. Horkheimer came back here. He taught after he had settled in Germany already. He still came back here and taught for several years because he was afraid. So it was not only that they had that experience in Germany, and so they were afraid it would come again. And even in details, you know, when Horkheimer talks about Eichmann process, he said the only purpose such a process can have is to prevent that from happening, but that will not prevent it from happening.
That was Adorno's new categorical imperative too, that we should, you know, turn all education to the point that we don't. And Lotz, in my defense there, said, how do we do that? I mean, how could that possibly be a thing? And I said, well, if you're studying engineering, maybe one should be, you know, teach the young engineers to be aware that what you produce can end up having the opposite thing, like Fritz Haber. You know, you produce something for good, you get the Peace Prize for it, but then it's turned into a weapon of mass destruction, you know. And so I don't think they ever thought about that, because this idea of education being directed towards Auschwitz never occurring again, had no idea how one could do that. But, you know, Rudy, I was wondering, you know, if the Frankfurt School feared that fascism could come back, I wonder what their relationship or what they thought about with, like, the Baader-Meinhof group, because their program was to show that it was there still, you know, and that it wasn't defeated, that it was still, you know, part of the government, that the old Nazis, some of them were prosecuted, but they came back. And then to produce the conditions by which, you know, they would reveal themselves to society as being still present and still there.
Definitely. I mean, they were influenced by the Frankfurt School. You know, all the women, and they were social workers, some of them, and they thought they didn't do enough. They were not practical enough. You know. I mean, the student movement was inspired by them, by the Frankfurters, and at the same time, they were critical of the Frankfurters because they were not sensuous enough. So the women, you know, came with naked breasts there into the classroom. And they were too abstract, and then they were not revolutionary enough. And so they practiced what they preached, you know. Rudi Dutschke and as well, you know.
Yeah, he got shot for doing it too.
By a worker, you know.
By a worker, a right winger.
So
I mean, I always wondered. I don't know where.
And see, it was also in the mainstream that suddenly a young generation woke up and said, "What have our fathers done?" You see, it was the next generation. And how could they possibly do that?
And why aren't they talking about it or saying anything about it?
Why they are so quiet about it? Because they had a bad conscience about the whole thing. And then also that the Federal Republic, there was a Democratic Republic and the Federal Republic. The Democratic Republic, you know, cleaned up the Nazis. The Federal Republic re-employed them. So what they saw about the judges, you know, which put them on trial, they were all old judges, you know. They were not of Nazi time, you know. The finance, the economics minister, you know, was put up by Hitler to lead a committee to make a reform, a currency reform, 1 to 10 devaluation, and that was done by Adenauer, you know. The Secret Service, everything, the old Nazi came, they were denazified somehow. And if they had not committed some direct crimes or whatever, and even then, they were all put back. And that is what they, you know, what they saw now. I mean, I was trained here to bring, you know, to change that fascist thing into a liberal one. And I think it was done, you know. But it was done superficially. In the same way, you know, they did pay billions of marks to Israel. But I think it was superficial in a certain sense. There was no real repentance of any kind in a serious way, you know. I know in Israel when I was there, some of the taxi drivers said, "Look, this is a present, my Mercedes here. It's a present of a German friend." So the German friend came with a whole Mercedes and gave it to him as a present. So I don't know if that friend, you know, felt something deeper or whatever. but I think when they did something good, personally or whatever, I wonder if they saw the whole connection with the whole thing. You cannot talk about Auschwitz without talking about capitalism. And they renewed capitalism. I mean, they produced a miracle, capitalism.
Right. The German
With
miracle.
with the American help, The American help was given, the Marshall Plan was given in order to keep communism out.
Right.
They offered the Marshall Plan to East Germany too, and they didn't accept. They offered it even to Moscow, and Moscow did not accept, because they thought it was a trick to make them capitalistic again.
And it was.
So this, but this thing was not thought through. That means the Adenauer thing, in which Habermas and so on grew up, was a restoration thing.
Right.
They restored Weimar. They restored the liberalism out of which socialism came, against which Krupp and Thyssen paid the fascists, and this guy here fought, and many others here. So that's why it's so important we see this fascism, liberalism, and so on, and we have few things there in which we can make that plastic to us, on the level of this simple little secretary, I mean, what Hegel talks about, the chambermaid perspective of history, that means we are sitting on the bottom and we have little holes where we can see what a bomber does. So if we were in the White House, we would get another perspective, So, but when you look at the secretary, that is the chambermaid perspective, Hitler, nice uncle, nice, feeling for the secretary, talking
kissed him on the head,
and then they don't understand, this other side. They never saw it, They did see it because this secretary, she talked to Eva Braun, the wife of Hitler, the last day, and she said, sometimes Hitler can be so unbelievably friendly, and so loving, and then suddenly everything changes. It becomes icy cold and so on. And Eva Braun said, yes, when he becomes the
Führer, right?
When he becomes the leader. Yeah. That means there was a shift, from neighborhood and family sociologically, or even civil society, and then history, where nobody really goes, I mean, our students tell stories about the family and the jobs and so on, but the state is already very different, far away. And if you go to the historical dimension, that is even further away. And for Hitler, this historical dimension was nature. That means that is fascist naturalism. It was nature with the aristocratic law of nature, the predator and the prey. And there you can see that he did, because he was not a dialectician. He did not see what the prophets saw, the dialectics of the aristocratic principle of nature. The dialectics is that the predator becomes the prey. See? Just think of your mind. So there is Babylon attacking Israel, because of its damned idolatry, and then come not the Egyptians. They could have come, but they didn't make it. Instead of that came the Persians, and ran over the Babylonians and undid everything again and so on. So first the Babylonians were the predators, broke into Israel, did all kinds of horrible things, but then in the next turn the predator becomes the prey. So at the moment, where Hitler said to this secretary, fate wanted it that way, National Socialism is all over, he knew that now he had become the prey, and then committed suicide as a way, out of this, But why did they not see the dialectics, the inner turning over, the contradictions in everything, including that law, that everything in nature, if they want to be naturalists, so the cat eats the mouse, and then comes a wolf or a dog and eats the cat, and so on. So it goes all over the place, all the time, And they just didn't see it. They thought it was stable, and it couldn't turn upside down. Well, I mean, they had an inkling of it, because Hitler said in the beginning, I will put this uniform on, and I will not take it off alive. So he announced, his suicide already 7 or 8 years before, and he just did what he said. But, the dialectics of this aristocratic law of nature, he tried to prevent it under all circumstances. So there was this SS general, he still had 100,000 men or something like that, and he was supposed to free Berlin, and he refused to lead 100,000 men against 2 million Russians coming under Zhukov, And that was the end. That is when he had really this outrage and said, you all betrayed me, and now nothing is left for me to do than to die. And he stormed out of the room. So, yeah. The Greeks asked me there, the professors in Ioannina, if the Germans had known Hegel, and I repeated, if he had not had Schopenhauer as his teacher, but Hegel, it could have become different. He was intelligent, he was a genius. That brain, it was one among billions. And all into tremendous details, he knew exactly when Hannibal attacked. He knew exactly the hour when Napoleon attacked, with how many men, 900,000, 22nd of June, and 1812 or whatever. And when somebody said, well, it's a bad omen, you're attacking the same day. No, he said, I'm not attacking the same day, I'm attacking 2 days later, at 12 o'clock, So, but that was far away, as far as the Romans were concerned, the struggle with the Persians and so on. He had it all there. And they did sometimes, they went to the library and say, well, was he really right? And they looked it up and it was right, without any formal education, only at high school.
That's what he yelled at his generals, wasn't it? Here, you went to school for this, and I did nothing, and I know it better than you.
No, and when you see all these pictures and these books, I think what I would predict is that he becomes another Napoleon. That's what they did with Napoleon. For 50, 60 years, they say he's a mass murderer, and put him on an island on the way, put him on another horrible island, and then he died. But then later on, 50 years later, they brought him back into Notre Dame in Paris and buried him there. He will not let them go there.
Well, what Goering said too, it's like they're 50 years from now they won't make big statues of us, but they'll make little ones, but there'll be a lot of them.
Well, that may be in their hearts, they make them already, but it may be an exaggeration, but and I hope it will be, really balanced. Now it's unbalanced, but it may become unbalanced in another way that would not be bad. So the critical component has to be there, what was wrong with him, really, and not from a German glorification or an ally condemnation or whatever. There must be a way to, and there are historians who are working, very well, and more material, comes in and so on, so they do change their position, But one has to take those things like liberalism or fascism, or so one has to take them serious, Whatever they are in the brain, and they cannot be reduced to anything what can be studied in the brain. You're not born with it, but it is an accumulation of the second nature, culture in people, and it has an unbelievable power. People use that liberalism to look at detailed things like food stamps and so on. So you make other decisions when you have that thing in your head. So therefore, it has to be. They are not only simply abstractions or whatever. They guide conduct and actions and policies and politics and so on. And we have National Socialism since 1900. Hitler did not invent it, and when he died, it went on. So he was one figure who, in the most radical way, tried to realize it, but it's a philosophy which goes on.
Well, I make that in my Ayn Rand book that I just finished. My last chapter is the question of fascism, and how Her philosophy is a modification of collective fascism into an individualism of a fascism, of individualistic, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a modification, but there's still aristocratic law of nature there,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, the greed, the selfishness, the whole thing.
Right. So one has to see how these three are connected with each other. So, I mean, it is liberalism, and then the injustice which happen, 40 million people in the slums or whatever, and out of this comes socialism in a crisis, and then the ruling class doesn't want to go peacefully, so then they support low middle class fascism against these socialists,
Mm-hmm.
And you have already liberals hating socialists, and fascists hating socialists, and Catholic hating socialists, and evangelicals hating socialists. So you have another tremendous potential there.
Right. We want to put that in?
Yeah. So let's look a little bit more. Why did we show this? We want to see Freud. We haven't seen Freud yet in the movie. We have seen Jung. Now, Jung is the student, right? We also said that Jung was supposed to develop psychoanalysis, psychoanalytic philosophy further, that he was to get out of the Jewish ghetto, and so Jung developed an Aryan type of a psychoanalysis against a Semitic type of psychoanalysis. And we had the model, right, of the psyche of Freud, and that was ego, id, with the libidinous component and the aggressive component, and the superego with the norms, etc., in it. Jung takes that over, so does Fromm, and so does Habermas, and so on. But Jung also modifies it. So in Jung, we have still the ego, we have the environment, we have the superego with the moral norms, and we have the id. But the id has not only these aggressive elements and the libidinous elements, they're still there, but they are also archetypes. They're called archetypes, images. There is the image called anima, that is the woman image inside of us, disposition. Then there is the animus, that's the male disposition, and then there is the self. So, and then there's the environment. So he changed it, and each of these archetypes has a positive and a negative side. So you have symbols for the good animus, like a good king and so on, and symbols for the bad animus, like a miserable dwarf. Or you have positive symbols of the good side of the anima, like a queen, and then of the bad side, the witch. And then you have the self inside, and there you have symbols like Buddha, like Yahweh, like Allah, and so on. They are symbols, names, images for that archetype, self, which was practically the God. And Jung mixed that up a little bit. So he thought because we had that in ourselves, therefore God was exist. He was asked once, do you believe in God? And he said, I don't have to believe in God because I know. But what did he know? He knew the archetype, which may not be exactly identical with the absolute. So that was, we can go into that. But so when you see when he treats this woman now, this Jewish woman, she's masochistic. She enjoys being beaten up by her father. It is not so that the father must necessarily be abusing her. We don't know that exactly, but it was part of the disciplining in the family. So remember, marriage, poverty, and education of children. So how do you educate your children? And it was a long tradition that children would be punished physically. So he punishes her physically. If thereby he had himself sadistic elements, that is very well possible. But for her, it was a masochistic type of an experience. For the fascists, they later on in the authoritarian personality, it was separated from sexuality. So then these Auschwitz people or so, they could torture people, and it had nothing to do with sex, but they enjoyed producing suffering for other people independently from sexual components and so on. And they also, could take a lot of suffering. Well, nobody can say that Hitler did not suffer, to the extreme, but he was willing to take that as well. So that is a component in the authoritarian personality of Fromm, that the authoritarian personality has these two components. It it is masochistic as well as sadistic. Sadistic downwards to the lower people, and masochistic upwards to the higher people, including Providence. So when Providence finally has spoken, that's the end. Fate wanted it that way. Okay, so that is before the First World War. By the way, it's 2014, so it was 100 years ago, right? So 100 years ago, the First World War started in August last year. It has started already, you know.
So good to meet you at long last, Professor Freud.
Now that is important. Here is the meeting. So Jung and his wife. You see, he is a nice smoking bourgeois there, Freud. And he kisses the hand.
The terms themselves should be reviewed.
Now, this is very important for us now. And where's the reference? The Frankfurt School prefers Freud over Jung, right?
It would make the teaching side of things much easier.
Here's euphemism.
Is it loud enough?
Once they work out what we actually mean, they'll be just as bold as ever.
I take your point. But I still think it's worth trying to sweeten the pill when it comes to questions of sexuality.
And by the way, please don't feel you have to restrain yourself, dear. My family are all veterans of the most unsuitable topics of mealtime conversation.
A number of clinical examples which I believe support my position with regard to sexuality.
So,
He's a
you see
healthy
there,
appetite.
there are modifications already about Freud's sex, and we have that in Fromm too. We have that all of. There is the issue of the death drive, destruction, and so on. And Fromm has a whole big book on this, and Marcuse, and so on. Right. So that's why it's so important that we get the background, the basis, the foundation of the discussion.
Psychoanalysis. Well, it's more logical. And it sounds better.
If you say so.
Jung calls his thing later on psychology of individuation.
Yes, and we continue to unearth new material. For example, the extraordinary procedure she devised as a small child, where she would sit on one heel, attempt to defecate, and at the same time try to prevent herself from defecating. She said this gave rise to the most blissful feelings.
So we see a lot of contradictions in the psyche.
Those are my patients who remain fixated.
So psychoanalysis is very dialectical.
Come on, the most amusing details. And of course all of them are finicky, compulsively tidy, stubborn, and extremely stingy with money. No doubt your Russian conforms to this pattern.
So that becomes the anal personality, right? We have the oral
The masochistic
element, the
aspect
anal
of
one, and the phallic
condition
one.
much more deeply rooted than any anal fixations we may have uncovered.
The two are intimately
The anal fixation may have something to do with
I can only tell you
homosexuality.
that she's rather disorganized, emotionally generous, and exceptionally idealistic.
Well, that's just a Russian thing. Is he a virgin?
Yes, certainly.
Freud later on got cancer of the inside of his mouth there,
The esophagus.
esophagus, and his daughter Anna treated him there. I went to the house in London where he finally died. He had this cancer 12 years. It was unbelievably painful.
Cigars are working.
I don't think you have any notion of the true strength.
So
and
that is
depth of
all
the
still in the glorious time of the bourgeoisie, before 1914.
Baying to send Freud to the auto-da-fe. But that was nothing compared to what happens when our ideas begin to trickle through in whatever garbled form they relate to the public. The denials, the frenzy, the incoherent rage.
But might that not be caused by your insistence on exclusively sexual interpretation of the clinical material?
So here we have it already. Maybe it's too sexual.
Experience indicates we must be Like him, I'm in the dark. All I know is I've set foot on the shore, and the country exists.
I think of you more as Galileo, and your opponents as those who condemned him while refusing even to put their eye to his telescope.
In any event, I've simply opened the door. It's for young men like yourself to walk through it.
I'm sure you have many more doors to open for us.
Of course, the added difficulty.
So they are a generation apart,
More
I think.
ammunition for our enemies. That all of us here in Vienna, in our psychoanalytical circle, are Jews.
Once they get out of the Jewish ghetto.
That, if I may say so, was an exquisitely Protestant remark.
I dreamed
Well,
about a horse
analyzes him.
being hoisted by cables to a considerable height.
You can write your dreams down if you want to.
And the horse is dashed to the ground. But it's not hurt. It leaps up and gallops away, impeded only by a heavy log which is obliged to drag it on the ground. Then a rider on a small horse appears in front of it so that it's forced to slow down. And a carriage appears in front of the small horse so that our horse is compelled to slow down even more.
I imagine the horse is yourself.
Yes,
Your ambition has been frustrated in some way.
the rider is slowing me down.
Yes.
I think this may refer to my wife's first pregnancy. I had to give up an opportunity to go to America because of it.
Ah.
The carriage in front perhaps alludes to an
So there's the
apprehension
dream, there are the
that our two
associations,
and other
with the
children
dream.
perhaps still to come
that's what they do.
will impede my
There's
progress.
a manifest dream, and then there's the hidden dream meaning, and that's what they try to get to.
Not to mention the inevitable financial difficulties.
No. Fortunately, my wife is extremely wealthy.
Oh. Yes. That is fortunate. This log,
Yes.
I think perhaps you should entertain the possibility that it represents the penis.
Yes. In which case, what may be at issue is that a certain sexual constraint has been brought about by a fear of a succession of endless pregnancies.
I'm bound to say that if one of my patients had brought me this dream, I might have said that the number of restraining elements surrounding this unfortunate horse could perhaps point to the determined suppression of some unruly sexual desire. Hmm?
Yes. There is that as well.
I wonder if you're aware of the fact that our conversation has so far lasted 13 hours.
See, that is how long a discourse can take.
Your young colleague, please don't apologize. It's our first meeting. We're ready to stay to one another.
They still like each other here.
We always will.
I shall have to be extremely careful.
What do you mean? Why?
He's so persuasive.
By the way, he is a bourgeois, she is a bourgeois. The whole thing is a bourgeois thing. Can think that a working class person will take this analysis.
Deeply unimpressed crowd of bohemians and degenerates, just picking up the crumbs from his table.
Well, perhaps he's reached a stage where obedience is more important to him than originality.
I tried to tackle him about his obsession with sexuality, his insistence on interpreting every symptom in sexual terms. But he's completely inflexible.
In my case, of course, he has been right.
Yes,
In many other cases.
as you would expect him to be in many cases, possibly even the majority of cases. But there must be more than one hinge to the universe.
the Bodensee in Switzerland? Or is it something else?
Lake Lucerne.
Cannot be the Atlantic.
That's got to be in Switzerland.
Hmm?
That looks like Switzerland.
Yeah. It's the
Do
Bodensee.
you like Wagner?
The music and the man, yes.
I'm very interested in the myth of Siebert. The idea that something
Wagner.
foreign,
A
heroic,
Jewish
and
girl
so
interested in
perhaps
Wagner.
only come from its sin, even if sin is dark as incest.
This is very strange.
What?
As I've told you, I don't believe in coincidence. I believe nothing happens by accident. All these things have significance. The fact is, I'm in the middle of writing
That is
something
a
myself
religious
about the
position.
music.
Are you really?
I assure you,
Which is your favorite of the operas?
that's Randolph.
Yes, that's right. Mine too. Can I ask you something?
Of course.
Do you think there's any possibility I could ever be a psychiatrist?
I know you could. I hear nothing but good reports in your work at the university. You're exactly the kind of person we need.
Insane, you mean?
Yes. We sane doctors have serious limitations.
Very
Dear
often
friend,
people who have
I feel like
problems
a
are
lot
interested in
myself is informed
psychology.
mode of address as I ask you to grant me a very particular favor. Dr. Otto Goltz, a most brilliant but erratic character, is urgently in need of your medical help. I consider him, apart from yourself, the only man capable of making a major contribution to our field.
The fix-up.
Whatever you do, don't let him out before October, when I shall be able to take him over from you. And remember his father's warning, made when Otto was only a very small child. Watch out for him. He bites.
You still feel threatened by your father?
Anyone with any sense feels threatened by my father. He is extremely
See,
threatening.
the family, we have to take the family very seriously.
His wish to have you hospitalized. You don't think that arises from a concern for your welfare?
Listen. What does any normal old patriarch want in the twilight of his life?
Patriarchy.
Grandchildren. Grandsons. Am I right? And yet, last summer, when I presented him with not one, but two little roses, one by my wife, one by one of my most respectable mistresses. Was he grateful?
Bourgeois.
One
Now
breaks
there's
out,
another
tries
one.
to break out of the bourgeoisie,
Admittedly by some woman I hardly know.
the patriarchal bourgeoisie.
Only can be banged away in some institution. You got any children?
2 girls.
Same mother?
Yes.
Boy, he is really off the
no.
track.
Not a believer in monogamy.
From neurotic like myself, I can't possibly imagine more stressful concept.
And you don't find it
Bourgeoisie
necessary,
is in a crisis already, and
desirable
So
to
is bourgeois
exercise
marriage.
restraint as a contribution, say, to the smooth functioning of civilization.
What? And make myself ill?
I should have thought that some form of sexual repression would have to be practiced in any rational society.
that was also Freud's position.
The wonder
That's
about
his
it,
position.
nothing ever seems. Tell me, do you find the best way to enhance your popularity with your patients is to tell them whatever it is they most want to hear?
It doesn't matter whether we're popular with them or not.
But I don't know. Suppose you want to fuck them. If there's one thing I've learned in my short life, it's this. Never regress anything.
libertarianism. Here's our friend Wagner.
Hello, Ricard.
A little bit old-fashioned instruments. One of my grandchildren does that with music, therapy with music. In Toronto.
So you've never slept with any of your patients? Of course not. Have to steer through the temptations of transference and countertransference.
Transference, yeah.
That's an essential stage of the process. When transference occurs, when the patient becomes fixated on me, I explain to her that this is merely a
So
simple...
he is also a psychoanalyst.
I assure her that it's fine to want to sleep with me, but only if at the same time she acknowledges to herself that she wants to sleep with a great many other people. Suppose she doesn't. Then it's my job to convince her that's part of the illness. That's what people
So
like.
he's a psychoanalyst whom Freud has sent to him.
Who will?
Because the psychoanalyst himself needs psychoanalysis.
You think all neurosis is exclusively
So
sexual?
Fromm and Horkheimer were analyzed by Landauer.
I think Fromm's obsession with sex probably has a great deal to do with the fact that he never gets any.
He never gets any?
My first thought.
It seems to me a measure of the true perversity of the human race that one of its very few lively, pleasurable activities should be the subject of so much hysteria and repression. But not to
You talk about the organism,
unleash all kinds
the
of
form,
dangerous
assimilation process, and the genus process. That's the sexual process. He wants to liberate that from all civilization. That will make him feel good.
I've heard it said that you help one of your patients to kill her. She was listening to suicidal. I just explained how she could do it without watching it. Then I asked her if she didn't have the idea of becoming a mother. She opted for both. That can't be enough for patients. Freedom is freedom.
So there's an attempt to break all taboos which civilization imposes on us.
He said that perfection can
But
only
Jung
be
does
arrived
now
at
exactly
with
what his
conventional
patient told him to do.
Is that right?
He makes her
Which must
into his
surely have
lover.
to do with the energy created by the friction of opposites. Not just that you're the doctor and I'm the patient, but that you're Swiss and I'm Russian, I'm Jewish and you're Aryan, and all other kinds of darker differences.
Darker.
Gonna confuse the genome.
If I'm right, only the clash of destructive forces can create something new.
Yeah, that was very dialectical. That's what she wrote her thesis on.
It's clear that the subject I'm studying is entirely grounded in sexuality, so naturally I'm becoming more and more acutely aware of the fact that I have no sexual experience.
Lucerne, if you have to close the
Law students
friends
are
who live in
expected to rock that.
near Basel.
Yeah, he built a little castle on the lake.
Now he starts. And here we have to close now. I'm very sorry about this. But we will continue the next time. Be consoled. Now he himself breaks the taboo which he had just still defended. Can you get me back to normal?
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for coming. Take the test with you, right? Study it. See what you want to do with it. Good. A++.
Take it to heaven.
Yeah. I say this only for the believers. question. Can we just move that stuff over there on my desk, maybe?
The books and everything?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay.
No, I'm good. Shukran kathiran.
Thank you. I have a hard time to get this bottle up. Okay. Be careful out there. Keep warm, okay?
And thank you so much.
See you in a week. Yeah, see you in a week.
Say, see you in a week, inshallah. Inshallah.
Jerusalem.
Next year in Jerusalem, right?
Right. I will get there someday still. Don't. Good night.
See you tomorrow? Inshallah, inshallah. I should be there.
Okay. So I'm back to normal then?
Yeah.
They don't look normal to me.
No, they don't look normal at all.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you for coming.
No worries.
It's very good that you're here.
I wouldn't miss it.
Wonderful. Now I hope that our David is okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to stop by there tomorrow after work and see, make sure he's
I
alright.
don't like it that nobody is with him.
No,
I don't know why his family doesn't function.
no. His daughter, his daughter, when he was in the hospital, did something to his accounts, or his money, and put her name on it, and she cleaned him out and took off for Florida. So he doesn't have much
And
of
the
an
ex-wife doesn't have any
No,
feelings
nope.
either.
None. And his sister and his mother, I mean, they're the sweetest people. It's just nicest, but they're in Muskegon, and
I mean,
so he sits here by himself, and he comes over to my house, maybe 2-3 times a week to
is
watch.
he close to you?
Yeah,
is it close to you?
He's only a couple blocks away from me.
Oh, really?
So
Can he walk?
well,